But yeah, Portsdown Classic, we finally get to talk about an actual bike race on these podcasts that has happened, rather than just talking about the news over winter, which was good fun, but it's not quite the same as talking about bike racing. I did race it. Racing in quotation marks there. Because I was at the back at the start, and I was at the back on the first lap, and then I was out in the back. So I didn't actually get to see any of the racing. Not as much as you got to see. What did you see from the front of the race, Owen?
Okay, I'm going to come to your rescue here. It was an incredibly high level at the front of the race. So we saw that. It was Raptor, Factory Racing, were kind of out with a vengeance. It was their first race as a team, as a new team. But then they're joined at the front by like Richardson's Trek, by Foran. So some big, strong riders that have got experience on those teams. And the pace was just infernal. But the crazy thing was that like a 4-3-man break went away and then managed to hold it pretty much the entire race, which kind of blew my mind. And then we ended up with the eventual winner coming from that breakaway as well, Jordan Giles, which the pace that it's being run at so early in the year is not exactly a fun day out for them, as you found out at the back of the race.
I mean, we've talked about this race before a little bit before, but we should intro it. I guess it's a very unique race. It's a very fast, well, maybe not necessarily fast. It's a very high level race, and the people that are in there are very strong. It's in February, so it's really cold. It's the classic kind of season opener. It's got one really steep hill in it that's about, 300 meters long, 200 meters long, and the rest of it is just really grippy. Normally lots of crosswind. Today, on the race day, we had a lot of headwind over the difficult part of the course, which kind of kept it together a little bit more than it normally is. When you've got a crosswind over the top of Portsdown Hill, it can just be single file for 80 riders, which is obviously disgusting and horrible to be in. But when it's headwind, you kind of bunch up a little bit more. So it wasn't a ridiculous pace, and it wasn't ridiculously hard as it has been in previous years. There wasn't any rain. And it's pretty short. Yeah. The winner did it in just over 1 hour 40 if you discount the neutral zone, which is for a road race really, really short. That's almost like crit length, really. And we heard it when you interviewed Rowan and Jordan after the race, and before the race, that it's not actually a hilly race, really.
Yeah.
Similar to like Lincoln. You might, obviously, you're thinking the Lincoln GP is the Michaelgate climb, but in reality, the rest of the course is pan flat with a descent. So the climb plays into the race, but it's not necessarily just the climbing that's important. It can still be very tactical. But how did that breakaway get away at the start? Obviously, it went away on the first lap.
Yeah, Raptor smashed it really early on. We were talking with them beforehand, and it was funny, as you mentioned, it's not as hilly as you expect. And Rowan had said early, he's a big guy, like 70, 80 kilos. And he can climb very well because he's very quick. But he was like, it is a powerful race. And if you can power over those things, the only climb that really matters is that finishing climb. So Raptor smashed it, I think, into the base of that first climb through it's like a chicane. So taking advantage of the natural road, the road layout to line it out. That didn't quite work initially. But I think what it did is it put everyone on the rivet enough that eventually, when the four riders did attack, there's less like firepower behind them to chase. They're four of the biggest teams there, so most people are looking to the big teams. The big teams are like, well, we're represented, we're not going to chase, and then you're left with the smaller teams and the individual riders. The interesting thing was that Rowan, who unfortunately punctured. So we had some like expert analysis from Rowan on the side of the road. He was unsure as to whether or not they would stay away. It was like, okay, at this current stage with a 20, 30 second gap, you can close that down so quickly just on Portsdown Hill or even on the finishing climb. And he said, what you need to worry about is if it goes over 40 seconds, over 45 seconds, next lap, boom, over 45 seconds and it's reaching out to like 50 and towards a minute. And we're like, hang on a second. This could actually be the winning move because you only have to stay away for another 30 minutes, not another 3 hours. So yeah, it was really interesting how that played out. And then eventually, Jordan Giles takes his opportunity. Clearly had the legs because he's attacking into the headwind on Portsdown Hill, but gets away from the chasers and holds it by like 5 seconds all the way to the line, I think. So
you've jumped ahead a bit there. I thought I was trying to build up some anticipation for the result, but Jordan did go on to kind of dominantly win. He got caught and then still had enough to get on. But the composition of the breakaway was quite interesting. Normally, at a race like this, you'd expect there to be lots of attacks, people getting excited. It's the first race of the year. The conditions were quite good. Just people flying off the front. And then there's just enough people behind, not necessarily cooperating, but just enough people behind flying off the front as well, that everything kind of sticks together or kind of blows up into little groups and then comes back together, rather than a breakaway being formed and then a chase being formed. But we had this time that the 4 that got away were pretty much the 4 strongest teams, and you've kind of instantly got a group that was completely represented up front with teams that weren't going to chase behind. Who was chasing behind? Was there any chasing, or was it just people attacking, closing that gap down, and then nobody wanted to work and it goes out again, then people attack?
It looked like most of the attacks were just individual riders accelerating on the front. You know what I mean? And for me, having the big teams at the front meant it had to be individuals who chased. And the individuals who chased in the end were Ed Morgan from SRCT, Scott Redding's team, and Tom Cousins, who's a privateer this year, but formerly of Ribble Rebellion. They are 2 incredibly strong riders. Like Ed Morgan's the Welsh national crit champion in 2024, and Tom Cousins has been absolutely smashing the national trophy series of the cyclocross. So when it comes down to like individual very strong riders, the difficulty is you need a breakaway where you don't have hangers on, where it's just the strong riders who are then willing to like up the gas. And getting that composition is really difficult, and they only got that, I think, on the final lap or something. It seemed like Ed Morgan, because Ed Morgan came across and managed to catch poor old Judy from Raptor, who just cracked on the final climb. Ed Morgan rolled him 200 metres from the line. For it to get to that moment meant you didn't have a concerted chase behind. It had to just be these like the strongest riders that had missed the move. Which was just an interesting composition, or an interesting like situation of the race. And I feel like I wanted to ask you, what do you think we can learn from it, looking forward to the next races? But I don't know if there is anything we can learn.
Not much more than just, obviously we talked about it as well before, it's not necessarily an indicator of how well you're going to do in the year. There'll be riders that finish on this result sheet that are like 40th, that aren't anywhere close to peaking for the year, and will probably go on to have very good years winning races. So there's not really too much you can read into the race, other than it's a really interesting race. Stuff like Raptor racing, I think, are going to be a force this year, just from the way they raced it, not necessarily the performance, which was very good. Just the way they went at it, I think, says a lot about what they're going to do for the rest of the year. You know, they kind of do want to grab the races by... what's the saying? They want to grab it by the collar. Is that a saying?
Grab it by the horns?
Grab it by the horns, there we go. Yeah, they are taking it pretty seriously. And even without their biggest rider, the star signing of Rowan Baker pretty much DNF'd instantly because he got a flat or a mechanical. They still got 4th, and it should have podiumed really if it wasn't for some cramping on the final climb. But it was a really, really close race. You talk about how the break, normally in a race, you know, the break attacks at the start, they get a big gap, you chill out, you rotate through, and you wait for the end of the race, see how much gap you've got, and then you can start, you know, cat and mousing and playing around, trying not to get caught, maybe just racing for the win or whatever. With a race this short, that's just under 2 hours, there is no middle section of the race where nothing's really happening. You just have the start of the race and then the end of the race. And they never really got a big gap. They never broke the elastic, essentially, which led to the top 11 being separated by 54 seconds, which is nothing, really. And it's not like there was groups. That was pretty much one rider, few seconds, one rider, few seconds, one rider. So yeah, a really good close race. No crashes as well, which is always great. There's normally a few of those at a first race of the season, but everyone was playing nice, I think.
Yeah, and that's nice from from my perspective. I don't want to jump on the next podcast about Harry's broken his collarbone. So I'm glad you walked away unscathed. But yeah, like it's I was really happy with it. And as a race, stepping away from the competition, as an event, Seb Otley's doing an amazing job. I think to grow a race that was like on its last legs. Really, it had died. It was the perfs. It had disappeared, and then for him to revive that, and not just revive it, but like revive it with a passion, is so good to see. And you've mentioned like the media. You've written down here like the media coverage. This is a random National B at the start of the season, but everybody wants to know what's happening. Everybody's doing stuff about it. Maybe does that show what people want to see from the British scene as well in general?
Yeah, I think it shows that cycling in the UK is on a decline in every single aspect. But that's not to say it just doesn't exist. There are more than enough people that want to watch videos and read articles and follow people on social media around racing enough to make it sustainable, and there's enough companies out there that want to sponsor it and support it. I wholeheartedly believe that. If I didn't believe that, I wouldn't be doing any of this ever. Like, I wouldn't be doing anything.
Yeah.
It just needs to be done in the right way. And we spoke about Raptor. I think I said that they seem like they want to do it in the right way. They want to get the media right. They want to get the sponsorship. You look at teams like Tour de Tietma, that they can do it sustainably. And from what we've seen at Portsdown, they are going about it in the right way. They had really good media coverage, kind of partnering up with what you were doing with the on-bike cameras and the interviews. It's going in the right direction. I don't think there's anything negative that can really be taken from Portsdown. Like, it was all the teams looked well-rounded. Raptor seems like a very positive change. And it just takes one Raptor to have a really good year. They're really positive. They get loads of sponsors. And then suddenly you've got every other team being like, oh, that's how we do it. And then suddenly 2026 is even better and so on. Did you have any hidden gems from the result sheet? I know we said there's not too much can be read into it. But I think there's definitely a few names that kind of...
Well, Jordan Giles winning is a good one. He's always been...
That's a really...
kind of...
sharp pick there, Owen. You really dove into the result sheet there. Wow. Jordan, the winner. I think seeing Ed Morgan coming in for third and the way he rode to third is impressive. He's on a new team this year, so often it's a case of, have you kept your motivation or has that dented your motivation? He's clearly still motivated. And him coming across and wanting to race, he could have, he's in a way, he's got bigger fish to fry. So he could have sat in the bunch, but he didn't. He wanted to race. And he comes across, attacks hard on that final climb and takes third place. Like, I was very impressed with that. Especially because at the beginning of the race, he was like, yeah, my heart rate's so high, I feel terrible. Like, like what even is a bike race? So him maybe in not top form, riding to that place shows that this year we could probably expect some good things from him. I think Judy as well, Judy Clare, the Raptor rider who ended up coming fourth, because he's not on the podium, you miss him a little bit. But he was in that breakaway all day. He was pushing hard. Rowan was screaming from the side of the road, like, do less work, sit in. But Judy's just like excited and was one of the driving forces. Sure, he cramped in the finale, but he's like a robotics scientist as well. Wow.
So the level of, he runs like a robotics startup, which is impressive. Really smart guy. He doesn't have as much time to train as the other people because he's running a startup at the same time. But he is smashing it, holding the pace at the front of this race. So I think with a little bit more time or a little bit more training, he could really be a feature in the national races as well. So that's kind of two riders for me that really stood out. Did you have anyone?
Hidden gems, Owen. I'm glad you've asked. Yes, I was going to say Jude or Judy. Does he go by Jude?
I think either.
Okay.
I hope
Sorry.
either. When I spoke to him, I went with Judy, and he was fine with Judy. So.
Okay. Sorry, Judy. Yeah, super impressive from him to kind of step up when Raptor didn't have any riders. I think I agree with Rowan that they potentially got a little bit lucky that they didn't get caught or he didn't blow up, because I think he's well within his right to be in that when they were 3 to just sit up and be like, I've got teammates behind. They might have not necessarily known that Rowan was out the back, so for all they knew, they still had their strongest rider behind them, as in the other riders in that breakaway. So I think he's well within his right to skip a majority of turns. But kind of names that might be not as well known. I mean, Tom obviously did very well to get 8th. He raced, like you said, very aggressively. Jacob Vaughan, previous winner of Perfs, he was up there in 13th. Probably a very different rider than he was in 2017 when he won. But lots of London chain gangs. Gus Dutton and his teammate, the Decathlon AG2R riders, they got 21st and 23rd in the kind of main group that finished together. So 2 very good performances from juniors. Oscar Lawrence, another junior, did very well. He was up there in the front group in 25th. So kind of you were up there in that front group. It's a very difficult race to position yourself properly.
Yeah.
Adam Howe up there in 6th. He was the second muck-off rider. He's he's a local rider that does road races occasionally, but extremely strong. Like, I've raced him at a flat race and he's got a ridiculous amount of watts. But yeah, just a really positive race. Any other comments on the Portsdown Classic?
No, I liked it. Do more of it. We'll cover more of them.
A weekly Portsdown Classic.
Weekly. Well, it honestly, that's one of the other news is covering that in the way that we covered it. We didn't have the full resources that we would for a national series race, but I want to cover more of it, like that level of race. I want us to put more resources towards that. So I'll be looking at how we can do that throughout the season, really, which is nice.